Appreciate the opportunity of being here as well as to watch the video and for all your efforts of the Center into trying to make this, make what is happening known to the public. The people that you saw in the video are not simply coming over from Mexico to the United States to milk cows and pick tomatoes. The three words that are going to be continuously used, because it is the new kind of immigrant coming in, are drug smugglers, human traffickers, that includes prostitutions and the rape trees that go along with it, as well as terrorists. And those are the areas of which I don't think many people in America are clearly aware. And that is why this film and other efforts on behalf to educate the public, I think, is so essential and so important. It is from San Diego to El Paso, 40% of that border with Mexico is owned by the federal government. That's federal lands. And there is 4 million acres of wilderness on that area, which have been simply co-opted, as was shown in this video, by, as a superhighway for drug trafficking and for human trafficking at the same time, and also for terrorist entrance into this country. The drug cartels clearly realize that it is federal land that now becomes the easiest point of entry. Border Patrol, I have to tell you, is extremely effective. So when Homeland Security says it is better on the border, it's true in some places. Border Patrol is very effective in urban areas, and they are very effective where there is private land that abuts the border. Legally, the Border Patrol has the ability of going into any property other than a home within 25 miles of the border on private land. And therefore, when you find those areas that are heavily dominated by private land and where the Border Patrol is allowed to do their jobs, the access is decreasing, it is safer, and the activity is decreasing. And it is decreasing because what it does is simply funnel the activity of those that we wish to keep out of this country now onto federal lands, because it is simply so easy. The border in Arizona specifically has always been a porous one. But because the Border Patrol is effective in other areas, the illegal activity, the bad guys that we want to keep out of here are now going to Arizona, so the situation is worse there, and it will only become worse until we take positive action on federal property on that particular border. It's one of the reasons why we have a Bill 5016 to try and allow the Border Patrol to have the same authority and opportunity on federal lands that they have on private lands, to do their job on, and I'm sorry, you're shaking your heads. That is what I always see when we say this is so logical and obvious. Obviously, that's why Washington won't do it, because it is just too logical and too obvious. But what we have here is simply a concept that we on federal lands are tolerating lawlessness. And what we simply have to do is say that it will not be. You saw the pictures in there of portions of American property that are now closed to Americans. There are national parks, Oregon Pike, for example, it's 95% wilderness, 90% of it is closed to Americans unless you have an armed escort. That is a ridiculous policy of appeasement to the drug cartels that we are doing, and our policy should simply be not 1 inch of American soil is controlled by foreign cartels. It should be controlled by us. That's the definition of a sovereign country, and there is no other possibility that should be there. It is true that our environmental policies and laws, specifically the Wilderness Act, as well as the Endangered Species Act, are taking precedence on our border over national security. And that is simply where we have got our situation screwed up. We are totally wrong in that. It goes to the opportunity that we were meeting once with Border Patrol representatives as well as Interior Department representatives, and they were so proud that they had reached a compromise on one of the electronic towers that they needed to monitor this situation. The Border Patrol wanted it on property that is wilderness designation. So they made a deal with Interior to move it somewhere else where both sides could agree. They were proud it was up, it was functioning. Unfortunately, from where they had to put it, it left a 3-mile hole in the security net where there would be no monitoring possible. I'm sorry, it doesn't take a genius to recognize that the bad guys know this as well, and that 3-mile hole now becomes the vehicle or the access point of choice in coming across here. It is ironic as well that in our effort to preserve the quality of land and endangered species habitat, we are actually allowing it to be degraded by the criminal element trying to come into this country. As you said, I think in the video, it's like 8 pounds per alien as on average of the rubbish and trash that is left behind. Endangered species habitat is destroyed by people who have no concern or interest in it. Our effort to protect the land is being destroyed by those who don't care about the land. So we end up with a net-sum game of a lose-lose situation because of us. And what has becomes now so frustrating as far as a policymaker is Homeland Security is being held up by the Interior Department and Forest Service for ransom. There are mitigation fees that have to be paid. Interior says or tells us that they have been paid $800,000 in mitigation fees from Homeland Security. Homeland Security tells us that they have paid out $9 million in that same period of time. The numbers don't work because our records are not very clear about the situation. It's one of the things we'd like to get a hold on, because when we appropriate money to Homeland Security, we anticipate that money will be spent on border security. Instead, it's being spent to the Interior Department for such wonderful things like, well, when they were putting up electronic signals in the California desert at one time, they had to pay a biologist to sit around full-time to verify that when those 15-foot poles went up, there was no animal that was crushed by the base of that pole. In Arizona, we have hired, through Homeland Security money, 3 full-time Department of Interior employees whose sole job is to monitor the Sonoran pronghorned antelope. And in one area where there was 1 acre of habitat for the ocelot that was considered to be harmed by Homeland Security efforts, the mitigation effort was for them to buy 55 acres somewhere else with money from Homeland Security as the payoff for that kind of mitigation. The problem is, when we authorize money for Homeland Security, we expect it to go to improve the situation. It flat out is not. When Rob Krentz, unfortunately, was murdered in Arizona, it is not a coincidence that the person who killed him came into this country through Fish and Wildlife, Interior lands, federal lands, and exited in a very long route through the exact same spot, because it is so easy to come in and out of this country on federal lands. And that problem is simply because we prohibit on federal lands the Border Patrol from doing their job. Homeland Security has said there is no real conflict between border security and natural resource protection. It's true. If Border Patrol was allowed to do their job, it would enhance our environmental situation. They've also said that the violence is decreasing on the border. No, it's not, especially on federal lands. Homeland Security said, well, it's a problem that's in the rural area. It's a long way away. It's not really important for us. It's wrong again. It is significant and important to us. And the key element is we need to give Border Patrol access to federal lands so they can do their job the same way they do it in urban areas and on private lands. I don't care how much money you want to spend down there on the border. It's useless unless Border Patrol has access. I don't care how many troops you want to send down to Arizona or New Mexico. It is useless if those troops don't have access. They have to be able to patrol on a regular basis, and the bad guys have to know that they will be patrolling on a regular basis. Otherwise, it is simply a free passport into this country. It is access that's the important element, and that's what we're trying to talk about. Border Patrol can do the job. We can control our borders, but they have to be allowed to do it, and currently the status quo is not allowing them to do their job. And that's why, for Janice Kephart and the others who are here, I'm so grateful for this video. It illustrates the point brilliantly, and it illustrates what I think should be a common sense no-brainer for us as policymakers, but we don't know it. And getting this message out has got to be the most important thing that we can do right now.